now to actually reflect upon the life, the legacy that Dr. Singh has left us with. Thank you so much, Mr. Mistry, for joining us, as well as we have D. Subbarao also joining us. I'll come very shortly to you, Mr. Subbarao. Let me take this question to Mr. Mistry. And yes, we all are remembering Dr. Singh today for his life, his legacy, and as a stellar economist and a statesman.
Yes, absolutely. I think he was a figure of integrity, towering figure, I would say, towering figure of integrity and intellect. He will always be known for his power of perseverance, humility, his visionary leadership. He was really the architect of the economic revolution in India. I remember the 1992 budget, which will always be remembered as a dream budget, as it opened the Indian economy to foreign investment. So he done so much for India. Today, where we are today, the foundation of that was laid in 1992 and when he was the finance minister.
Oh, well, yes, a towering figure indeed and a great loss to the nation. But we also have Mr. Subbarao with us. Sir, you have seen him at close quarters, the way he handled, of course, the Indian economy, RBI, in whatever capacity he worked, whether it was the advisor to the Prime Minister, as a CEA, as a RBI governor, FM or Prime Minister. One thing was very sure, that he worked for the people, and he had this, uncanny power of visualizing a very, very long term, which, not many people have. How would you summarize his legacy?
I think so. I agree with what you said. One of Dr. Manmohan Singh's less known traits is his keenness to understand what's happening in the hinterland of the country, across 600,000 villages in the country. So whenever I went to see him about RBI matters, we would, of course, talk about the macroeconomic situation, but he would ask me questions about what's happening at the field level. For example, about why there's so many farmer suicides in my state of Andhra Pradesh. Or he once asked me, out of the blue, as it were, are banks functioning in the Naxalite-affected areas? In fact, I was so embarrassed listening to that question, because it never occurred to me to ask myself that question. He also asked me how the Manrega was performing at the ground level. So one of the less known qualities about Dr. Manmohan Singh was his keenness to know what's happening on the front lines of the country, and thereby feed that into the big decisions that he had to make.
Mr. Subbarao, I wanted to actually come back to you and ask you this question. Like Anisha also mentioned, that you've also worked with him pretty closely, given the fact that you're also the former RBI governor of India. You have even Manmohan Singh also hold that sort of title. Any words of advice that he had given to you and that has stuck with you all through your career and also now?
In fact, I tell that story many times. I told that before. I'm happy to tell that here. When I was appointed governor in September 2008, I was then Finance Secretary to Government of India. So I went to call on him in his South Block office just to thank him for the confidence he reposed in me. So we talked about the macroeconomic situation, about the RBI's challenges at that time. It was a brief meeting, just about 15 minutes. After about 10 minutes, I asked him, "Sir, you were governor of RBI yourself. Do you have any advice to give me?" Dr. Manmohan Singh, as we all know, was a humble man with that faint smile, which you see more in his eyes than on his lips. He demurred, saying, "What advice can I give you, Subbarao? You've been in the IAS, you've seen the country, you know government, you know the RBI. Do whatever you think is best for the country and for the economy." After a couple of minutes after that, I got up to take leave of him. And he, gracious man as he was, he walked around from his chair, escorted me to the door. And as I opened the door, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Subbarao, you asked for my advice. I just want to give you one piece of advice, which is this, that when you go into the RBI, you will get so lost in numbers like inflation, interest rate, exchange rate, money supply, credit growth, that you will forget that behind those numbers are real people and their livelihoods. So that's a risk you will run, because you've been in the IAS. That's the difference between the IAS and the RBI. That advice disappeared from my mind shortly after I left his office. But as I cut my teeth into the RBI job over the next 6 months, the real import of what the Prime Minister said to me came to me. What he was really telling me was that the RBI's main mandate is to control inflation, which is to maintain low and steady prices. And that is very important for poor people across the country because inflation is a regressive tax. It hurts poor people more than it hurts well off. What he was telling me was that keep the large number of poor people in the country in view as you make policies. So that advice stayed with me through my RBI tenure and over the last 10 years, even after I left the RBI.
What an anecdote, and I'm sure we could go on because he'll have multiple such incidents. But, Mr. Mistry, let me come back to you. One more special quality that Dr. Manmohan Singh had was the power to take everyone along, and not just, in terms of the allies and the political relations. I'm also talking about the way he strengthened the international relations. I think he was one of those first prime ministers who deepened the tie with the United States, whether it was with relation to the nuclear treaty and others as well, and of course, globalization and liberalization. Your take on that?
Absolutely correct. I think not only did he display extraordinary courage and foresight, particularly at a time when India was facing an economic crisis, when he boldly introduced reforms that really transformed the economy. But when he became Prime Minister, at that time also he continued to steer India with a steady hand. He championed so many landmark initiatives like the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the Right to Information Act, all of which empowered millions of people. And also, as you said, his foreign relations. The time he started building the relationships with the U.S. at that time. But what really sets him apart was his quiet dignity, his unwavering commitment to public services, and despite all his towering achievements, as Mr. Subbarao said, he was always so very, very, very humble.
Yes, very humble indeed. And yes, history has been much kinder to Dr. Manmohan Singh than the contemporaries. That was his line, and that's turning out to be really true. Not the weak Prime Minister that he was unnecessarily alleged for, but a very, very strong statesman who's left behind a big legacy and, tall benchmark for anyone to even attempt to meet that. Thank you, gentlemen, for making time for us and joining us in celebration.